show. It's just going to be like, we'll see what happens with the format. We just have.
Are we going to stay live to the second show, or?
We may as well. I mean, and I think the second show's format is kind of like to be determined. I don't 100% know what's the feasible way to do this. Like what will make this show predictable? Because again, to them, they're expecting the next regular show, and this is to us, it's the second show we recorded today, so it's not as easy to provide.
I think there may be some merit to making it a slightly different format, though, for our own sanity.
I agree. Totally
make it a little bit different, and I think the audience would enjoy it too.
And it's almost going to be by necessity at this point, because there's only so much on the bench and what's new that we could share that doesn't change from that period of time. Okay, we are live now.
Hello, people.
You're as
even here yet.
You're as big as I am now. People always complain that my image is bigger than the two of yours, and I'm lucky to get these images up on this live streaming thing.
Right.
So if we want Cremona to not be here all the time, we could definitely have a larger image.
I love tech support during live sessions. It's like, that's great to know. I have no idea how to address that.
I'll take care of that later.
We are lucky that this is actually in HD right now.
Exactly. Okay, so you got your topics at the beginning?
Yep.
Summaries, okay. Work sharpening is yours. Nothing in what's new, but we have a lot of stuff to mull over here, so I think we'll be okay. Anything for lumber update? Yes, you do have a lumber update.
Yeah, just real quick. Relevant to the storms.
Shannon's, go around with your truck and pick up everything you can?
Yeah.
all the down trees? Send
Tom Iovino love letters, because that dude's not going to get any sleep for the next week.
Yeah, I saw his post last night. He's like, all right, I'm turning off my phone. I love you, but tomorrow's going to be a long day.
I love you, but stop talking to me.
Yeah, all right. Both tracks recording this time, so I'm ahead of the game.
All right.
Oh, wait. Why is that Wood Talk 409? Oh, we're on 409 and 410, correct?
According to the tab, that's what it says.
409, 410. Yeah, that's what got me last week. The tabs were off. I don't know why I put the wrong numbers there, but so we're on 409 and 410 this week. Okay, we're good. Let us do it, Joe. All right, here we go.
Welcome to Wood Talk. Now here are three guys who like to use a lot of words, yet say nothing at all. Mark, Shannon, and Matt.
All right, it's Wood Talk number 408 for 9/11/2017. Yeah, it's crazy how something that big happens on a particular day, and you can kind of never say that thing, even though it's just a date. You can't say it without invoking feelings and images from the past. It just kind of hit me as I was reading it that you kind of have to bring attention to it. Or maybe we shouldn't. I don't know. It's one of those tricky things. You never want to forget, but you don't want to harp on. I
just got startled because I forgot that we're pre-recording the show, and I suddenly thought it was the 11th instead of the 8th. Well, yeah. And I was like, I just
missed a couple of days here.
What happened?
Yeah.
I went on a bender and lost 2 days.
Right. Okay, so anywho, this is for, it would be Monday, 9/11/2017. And on today's show, we're talking about large table sizing, how we charge for our work, and work sharpening. But before we get to the topics, I do want to mention that the show is sponsored today by Brusso Hardware. Brusso Hardware, you guys know them. We talk about them a lot. They make fantastic stuff. You want to check out their Photo Extra newsletter. It's a weekly update from Brusso dedicated to customer-submitted photos. Brusso's customers work on detailed projects including ring boxes, humidors, keepsakes, gun boxes, and furniture. It's an excellent source of inspiration for your next project. The newsletter is short, quick, has great photos, and is delivered right to your inbox. So just go to brusso.com/photoextra, all one word, photo extra, and you can sign up for that. Get it straight to your inbox. I could always use more inspiration. Some nice, pretty pictures with some sweet hardware on it.
I could always use more email. I mean, wait.
Wait a minute. Never mind. Unsubscribe. No, seriously, good stuff. You want to go out there, check it out. Thanks again to Brusso for sponsoring the show. And we have to thank some individuals. I did a poor job of preparing for that. Hold on. There it is. Kyle Campbell and Patrick Odelstorp. Both of those folks went to patreon.com/woodtalk and helped us out with a recurring donation and got a little something in return for it. So speaking of Patreon, Shannon, we have some news.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Matt's not here.
Oh, yeah. That's just
Matt's
totally skipped over that.
England, eating strumpets and scones.
I didn't even notice.
Crumpets and strones and strumpets and scones.
And bangers and mash.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week. Yeah, he's doing that stuff for Triton. We talked about it on the last show, so he is enjoying himself over there. I think he's very tired, actually. The time change is a little bit rough, but we don't want him to have to deal with Skype calls and hotel internet connections and all that fun stuff, so he's not going to be on the next couple of shows.
If he knows what's good for him, he will never complain about being tired because his wife is home alone with 2 kids.
That's true. Yeah. Good point. Very good point. But anyway, yeah, so he's not going to be here. And we do have some news, and this is not necessarily good news, but it is news by necessity. So there will be some changes to Wood Talk and to the Patreon campaign that was very closely associated with this new schedule that we had over the past year. What it comes down to, and I'm going to take 100% of the blame for this, I got to a point after the break that we just took in late August. I got to a point that I really didn't want to do the show anymore. And it's not that I don't, maybe that's the bad way to say it. I do want to do the show.
I just don't want to do the show.
But it's becoming much more difficult for me to do the show. As my kids get older, my home responsibilities increase. We keep adding things to my work plate, but we never take anything away. And that's only sustainable for so long. And unfortunately, if I have to chop something away, Wood Talk is that thing because it is, out of all the things that I do, as much fun as it is, business-wise, it doesn't necessarily yield as much in the way of results as other things that I do. And it comes down to, like, would the average person who follows what I do prefer I spend my time on Wood Talk or making videos, which is my primary bread and butter. So it just got to a point where I was not looking forward to the show. Think about what we do now. We do 3 shows a week, basically, and it takes up the entire Monday. And that's a big hit because I know my Friday's already taken up. So that leaves me with about 3 days to get all my work done during the week. And that's just not sustainable. So I talked to the guys. They kind of talked me down off the edge a little bit to say, hey, look, there are things we could probably do to make this easier on us.
You've assumed the Vanderlist role now. We have the Matapause, the Markopause conversation now.
Yeah, but this was purely my guilt. Like, I'm not going to just kill the show without, consulting with you guys. And it was like, okay, clearly they're not ready to let this go. So we're going to keep going. But here's the deal. The long story made short is that we are simplifying what Wood Talk is. We are going back to a simple weekly schedule. We have gone to a simpler recording schedule, which has nothing to do with you guys. It's our internal organization of this stuff that makes me gain my Mondays back, right? So we're lumping everything that kills the workday into Fridays. So Friday will always be shot, but at least I have Monday through Thursday now, and it should be sustainable for a lot longer. So what's going to happen along with this is there will be no email extra. And there will be no
co-host.
Oh, look at that. Oh, he's Kenny. He's such a big boy now. Look at him.
He's sitting here whining. So if whining comes through, it's his fault.
He's upset about the schedule change and the Wood Talk changes. So unfortunately, those things are going, but we will still be committing to our regular weekly schedule like we have done for years. And you know what? That crazy schedule we just had, that was fun. It was fun while it lasted. And I just don't feel like it's sustainable for me personally. And I think if we really want to play the long game here, because we're already 10 years into this, if we're gonna go for 20.
Game? Good Lord.
Yeah, if we're going for 20, here's what we need to do. So yeah, so at least for now, the show is not going away, but we are reducing the output. So I know it's going to be disappointing to some people, but it's probably less disappointing than if I were saying right now that we are not doing the show anymore at all, right? That's the way I'm looking at it. So
yeah.
So there it is. Got that off my chest. But anyway, so we still do have the Patreon campaign. You may want to go there and just double check what's happening in terms of the Patreon rewards. I don't want anyone to be upset if they felt that they had a bait and switch because they expected one thing and got something else. So please go to patreon.com/woodtalk, double check your reward levels, make sure you have what you think you have, and then make changes or adjustments as you feel appropriate for the situation. Okay?
And I don't think that you should take 100% of the blame. All right, you can take 100% of the blame. But I mean... Yeah. It's been exhausting. There's no question. We all have our businesses that we run. I've got my business that I run and then this W-2 job thing. And yeah, it's exhausting. But I think what should come through in this is, we spent an hour before we recorded the last show on Monday. God, that was just Monday.
Yeah.
It's been a long week already.
Yeah.
But we spent a lot of time talking about what kind of compromises we can make and do everything we can to keep this show going. So it's definitely not oh, I don't want to do this show anymore. It's exactly the opposite. It's, you know, how do we keep it alive? How do we keep it exciting? How do we keep it fun? Because I don't know. I think you could look back in the history and go, there was probably a time where we weren't having as much fun, and I think the show probably wasn't as good.
Yeah.
And then we found it again, and the show became a heck of a lot better. So
yeah. Well, I agree, and that's the thing. It's a high point for this show. I mean, I know
you need sunglasses, Mark.
I do. It's bright, and what I'm looking at is the wasp that's flying in right near the window here, that will probably land in my eyeball and sting me.
Okay, cool.
Because they aim for the eyeballs, you know.
Yeah, another reason why you should watch live.
Yeah, it's much more interesting. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that we really are in a high point here in terms of engagement and stuff like that. And it really was hurting me. The audience perception and the reaction to something like this was the thing I was worried the most about. And I'm glad we can still continue to do it. But hopefully folks understand that it's mostly a personal thing for me. And obviously you guys are you know, rushed and have schedule conflicts and things like that too. But it certainly was becoming really problematic for me, and I needed to do something. So at least this is something. The show will go on, at least for now. So there's that.
Oh, wow. He's got to throw that little warning in there, at least for now.
At least for now. You know, I don't want to make, you know, false promises, but for now we're still doing the show. Okay, so let's get to what's on the bench. I have finished my garden gate. That was a project that was started when Cremona was here. Finally got all the coats finished, got that thing assembled. And once it was together, I actually brought in the bathroom scale and plopped that thing on top. And it is a pretty solid 100-pound gate. So fairly substantial. So what I did was put 3 hinges on there. Each one of these hinges is rated for about, I think 50 to 60 pounds per. So I think I'm well within the range by having 3 of them. I have the capacity I need. My biggest concern is actually the hinges going into the posts that are the supports on my walls outside. Those are original. I did not change those. I'm just putting the gate in place of the old gate. So I'm not sure how well those are going to hold up over time, and I may need to replace them as well. But for now, the gate is swinging. Everything is nice and sturdy, and I'm loving it. It looks really good.
That's awesome. It looks fantastic.
It turned out okay. And I think the weird thing about this, and either this week or for next week's show, I've got a question about what it's like to build out of square intentionally, you know, when you're not used to doing that type of thing. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when the time comes. The other thing is I am working on the free guild, the free tier of the guild, the picture frame content. It's just a mountain of content. Just from when Matt was here, and even after he left, I continued to film some stuff. It's just a ton of material to go through, and it all has to be prepped for whenever we decide to launch this thing. So I haven't had a chance to get all that done, but that's actually what's keeping me busy these days. And one last thing, we are having the guild project sales again this year. We did that last year. It worked out really well. Each week, for the weekend only, we will be putting one guild project on sale, and people have just throughout the weekend to get 30% off of that particular project. So this week it is the, I'm trying to think, this is going to be on Monday. So I don't know what the next one is because it was the shaker table for the weekend. Most people won't hear this until Monday or Tuesday. So whatever the next project is, you'll find out about it on Friday. But this will be going all the way through till Christmas, which is kind of
cool. So you're just like department stores. You've got your Christmas decorations up in September. Yeah, we already got the Halloween stuff put away.
We're on to the Thanksgiving and Christmas stuff, so it's all good.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, things have gotten, if I thought things were busy, because you're in this now preparing for a launch, I thought things were busy preparing for a product launch and editing the mountains and mountains of video, but I'm back to work now, and I got 3 projects starting to pile up on my bench all of a sudden. No matter what I do to avoid working on multiple projects at once, there's just no way. If I want to continue to keep hand tool school stuff and Renaissance woodworker stuff going, it just got to happen. So I have a couple of 9/4 pieces of 15-inch wide walnut sitting on the bench right now. I'm going to make a steak stool. So if you remember back in January, I did a group build with a bunch of guys in the hand tool school. We built a bookcase. I did the whole thing live. We're going to do another one this fall, and I'm going to build a staked stool. So, imagine Windsor chair, tapered tenons, tapered mortises, and a big kind of slab seat, maybe a little maloofish carving on it.
Nice.
you know, kind of that look. It's I'm in my mind, I'm envisioning a cross between Maloof and Windsor, but just a stool, no back or anything like that. So that I don't exactly know when that's coming up, most likely October, middle of October, something like that. But the plan is to, again, build the whole thing live. We'll see how well that goes. So I'm just bringing the lumber from the shed, letting it acclimate a little bit. At the same time, I'm cutting up walnut to build the Chippendale mirror for the hand tool school. So I'm really excited about that because it's been a while since I get to play with veneer. And I've got some really, really cool crotch figured walnut veneer. And I'm doing fret work and stuff with that. It's going to be really fun. And then if that wasn't enough, I used a track saw. And I cut up some plywood because I got to do my sharpening station redesign mainly just so I can get this dang plywood out of the way.
Yeah.
It's like leaning up against the wall, and I found myself digging through it to get to stuff enough times. I was like, all right, that's enough. We're going to build this sharpening station because ultimately it's a plywood box that I may even pocket hole screw together. I don't care. I just want to get it done.
No,
it's pocket hole screw joinery on really high quality A-faced cherry plywood. So why not?
Nothing wrong with that.
It's the plywood I've got left over from, Woodworkers Fighting Cancer, the kids table
and
chair
chairs.
build. Was that last year or 2 years ago?
That was two. Ooh.
Yeah.
No, that was last year.
Was it? Okay. Well, still, it's like half a sheet left over from that build.
Wow.
And it's got to get out of the way, and it's gorgeous plywood, so I might as well put it to use on something. So, yeah, I'm hoping actually to get most of that box built this weekend, depending on how life goes around here. But yeah, it's busy in here. I'm loving it.
Nice.
Kind of nice.
I mean, do you like having the multiple project thing going?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, I love the initial stages of a project. I love the planning. I love the kind of like breaking down stock into parts and doing grain and color matching type work. I think once I get like into the nitty gritty, I start to change my tune a little. And then what happens is one gets shelved and I just focus on one project at a time. But the cool thing is like the stake stool, there's really not a lot to it. It's carving a seat, riving some legs and drilling a couple mortises, and that's it. So that's one that because it's going to be built live, there's not really going to interfere with anything. Just going to kind of not do other work for however many days, the 2 or 3 days that it takes to build it. The mirror, that's got a lot more details in it, but hopefully the other ones, the sharpening station one will just be done and out of the way. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. Like the last few months have been just by necessity, working on multiple things at the same time, and stuff's just not totally complete. And I've had anywhere from 2 to sometimes 3 different projects going on at the same time. And I guess if we were just woodworking and not documenting, it wouldn't be so bad. But the fact that I have to organize, I even had at one point 4 different memory cards going because I like to keep all of my content specifically, on a single memory card. So I had this little board where I wrote each project on it and had the appropriate memory card sitting on top of it so I wouldn't get confused. I do not like that. I like to focus on a single task, get that thing done, and then go to the next one. So that's why I'm super relieved right now. There's nothing in the shop. The Adirondack chairs are refinished. Those are outside now. The garden gate is installed. That's done. And I don't have to think about anything until I decide what the next project is. So my brain does not like to multitask when it comes to big projects.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. And I think a lot of it comes out of, the orientation semester that I did for the hand tool school was 4 projects. Now, one of them, the bench was already done. But in a course of a week, I built 3 projects and, had to have it all built, filmed before I left Maine again. So maybe I'm just in that mode right now. And it was the same way. I had like 6 different memory cards rocking, one for each project, one for like, lesson videos, one for like sales and like miscellaneous videos. And you know what I always love is SD cards. They have that little space with like the blank line to write on it.
Yeah.
What magical thing actually writes on those surfaces and doesn't rub off? The only thing I need to actually show up is Sharpie, but then it rubs off every time I pick the thing up.
Yeah, it's the ones that you write on a grain of rice with. When they it's that type of thing.
Pencil doesn't work. Ballpoint pen doesn't work. Like, why did you put this space here if it's... So I've actually gone to every woodworker's favorite solution, blue tape.
Hey-o.
Little blue tape over it.
Nice.
Use a fine point Sharpie to keep track of them all. Yeah.
Very
awesome.
cool.
It was funny as we were packing up tools and coming home, and we were in a rest stop somewhere. Oh, we pulled over to watch the eclipse somewhere in Massachusetts. And we had a rest stop and we're walking away. And I was like, oh, yeah, we just left the car unlocked. My first thought was, I don't care about the tools in the back of my car. I don't care about any of that stuff. I just care about memory cards.
Yeah.
I can buy more tools. I can't replace those memory cards right now.
Can't replace content that's been filmed.
There's like 128 gigs of irreplaceable stuff there.
Totally.
Can't do it.
All right, let's get to our kickback here. You guys sent some feedback in on things we talked about in the past. And the first one here is from Zev, and he's got some miter saw kickback.
Hey guys, Zev here.
Oh, hold on. I think my audio settings are whacked out. Hang on a second. I might have to edit this out later. Depends on how lazy I am. Let's see if this works.
That was playing in your shop.
It was playing out of the speakers.
It's like Nicole just walked by. Is that her voice?
All right, is this better? This should do it.
Hey guys, Zev here from Queens, New York. Just calling to give a little bit of kickback on the miter saw discussion from last week's show. I have the Bosch 12-inch glide miter saw. Was able to get pretty decent results, not amazing, but I enjoyed having the additional capacity and depth of cut. I work out of my small one-car detached garage, so I'm always looking for ways to maximize my space. A while back, I decided to get rid of my conventional workbench and move to the Festool MFT. And part of my thought process is that I can get the track saw, and using that in conjunction with the MFT will hopefully give me better results than I was getting with my miter saw, and to eliminate the need for the miter saw at all, and I could just take the track saw and put it on a shelf when not in use. I went with the TS75 from Festool for the additional depth of cut, so I'm not too far off from the 12-inch, although there have been a few situations where that additional depth of cut would have been nice, especially on angled cuts and very thick boards. As of now, I am getting much better results in terms of accuracy, repeatability, and I see no reason for me to ever go back to a miter saw. I'm actually looking to sell my current Bosch. It's just been in my attic for the last few months, and I've had no desire to use it. Yep, that's just my thought. I don't really see a place for a miter saw in a fine wood shop. There's just so many better ways to do it. I have a small job site table saw, so it's not really big enough to get decent results with a crosscut sled. Also, the aluminum tabletop just doesn't lend itself to a ton of accuracy on the miter slot, so I wasn't able to get great crosscut results, so I just needed to look elsewhere for that. All right, keep up the good work, guys, and thanks so much. Take care. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And I forgot what I was going to say. It had something in my head, and now it is completely gone. So,
okay. Well, let's look at this from a different perspective, from a pro's perspective. This comes from Todd Clippinger. American Craftsman Workshop?
American Craftsman Workshop.
Yeah. Todd says, I'm jumping on the miter saw topic here from the perspective of the trades. And the shops and on the job sites, there is no debate or question about it. The miter saw is the go-to machine and the way to make the cut. Yes, sometimes we make a sled or carriage for something especially thick or big and run it across the table saw. But generally speaking, the sliding compound miter saw is the workhorse for cutting parts when building a project. The projects I'm talking about are high-end built-ins, trim, furniture for multi-million-dollar homes, exclusive country clubs and churches. Exclusive churches? I don't know. Isn't that against the whole thing of church? Shouldn't they?
I think it depends on which church you go to.
Yeah, unless you're Joel Osteen and there's a hurricane. For these types of clients and what they're paying, the demand and pressure for excellence is high. These definitely fall into the fine woodworking category, and the parts are cut on the miter saw, most often a slider. I'm not sure why so many in the woodworking community have such a bad experience or carry a disparaging view of the miter saw, yet they are relied on and embraced by the craftsmen doing custom high-end work. I know that some woodworkers don't want a miter saw in their shop. It's not part of the experience they want. I definitely respect that. But if the question is, does the miter saw have a place in the fine woodworking shop? I think the answer is yes. It's a very practical and productive tool. And the number of craftsmen making a living with miter saws that are doing high-end custom work proves they are effective and definitely worthy of the woodworking shop. Well said, Todd.
Yeah,
well said.
It's always good to get that perspective. The thing about it, and if I'm trying to figure out what is the reason why folks have the problem, I think one of the issues is
it's not folks, it's hobby woodworkers.
Hobby woodworkers.
We just like to complain.
We have problems with everything.
We got too much time on our hands, so we armchair woodwork.
Too much time, too much money, not enough going on.
Basically, yeah.
I think it comes down to that standard crosscut. Okay, so if you are using the miter saw to do things like cut, trim, molding, you're doing installs, you're on site, yeah, it makes perfect sense because it's portable and it's easy to use, and you could just very quickly get bevel and miter angles to suit whatever the project calls for. But in the wood shop, we kind of have an expectation for these really accurate 90-degree crosscuts and really wide crosscuts. And that's where things start to fall apart a little bit, and where that on-site installer probably isn't doing as much that concerns a perfect 90 on a 10-inch wide panel. You know what I mean? That's something that we're going to do a lot in the home shop or in a small shop, but not necessarily something you're going to do as much on the job site. And if you are, that edge probably isn't nearly as critical that it be perfect. And I think that's where things start to fall apart a little bit between what the pros are doing versus what people like me do in the shop.
Yeah. I mean, built-ins and built-in type work is always different than freestanding furniture.
Yeah.
And generally there are no such things as 90 degrees, and everything has a back bevel on it so that it seats cleanly, against an inside corner, regardless of what that corner is. I mean, the people that Todd is talking about, these are my customers by day, multi-million-dollar, $100 million homes to people whose names that and
right.
they just spent $275,000 on lumber alone. So I totally get what he's talking about. Yeah. So, it's kind of a different world. It's all fine woodworking.
Yeah, sure. And it also, I think a lot of it comes down to the person who's using the tool. You're talking about these installers who have tons of experience, who are out there just, it almost, for those guys, probably doesn't even matter what the numbers on the tool say. They're going to get that thing lined up to cut exactly on the angle they need it to be because they're good and they know how to utilize that tool. So I think there's also an experience difference that leads to that tool being more useful to them. Okay, let's get to our voicemail here. Got a voicemail question from Christopher.
Hello, gentlemen, hairy or otherwise, I don't judge. This is Chris from downstate Illinois, and I have a question for you. You guys talk an awful lot about high-end tools, Festool and Powermatic, things like that. And you also bring up lower-end things, such as Harbor Freight. But you don't mention a whole lot of the in-between, the average man's working tools you would find at Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards. Things like DeWalt or Porter Cable, maybe even Craftsman, Black & Decker. I wonder what you guys suggest, what you don't suggest. What's your opinion of some of these companies? I would appreciate any information you would give me. I value your opinion and respect it. Thank you.
He has sort of a airline pilot thing going on with his voice, right? Yeah, we're cruising at about 10,000 feet, and if you look down on your left, you'll see there's a Harbor Freight down there, and this is his approach. I would love to hear him say more.
Please keep your arms and legs inside the Harbor Freight at all times.
Christopher,
as
you got
tools will have shifted.
Leave us more messages, man. This is fantastic. I love that. Okay, so middle ground, and I think we do mention these things. I think it's a matter of what we have in our shops, right? Here's the thing. Matt is using Triton. I wouldn't necessarily call Triton a higher end tool, and I definitely wouldn't call it a lower end tool. I would say they are firmly in that contractor grade, decent quality tool. And, I'm using a Bosch miter saw and downgraded from the Festool Capex, and I've got a Bosch router that I'm using that is really good. So, I mean, we do kind of touch in and out on these things, but it's really a matter of, as individuals, what do we have in our shops? And that's generally what we're going to talk about. So that said, any initial, I know you're not Mr. Power Tool guy at all anymore, Shannon, but your perceptions
from
of
a hand tool perspective, the reason we don't talk about it is they don't exist. Wood River, maybe, from a hand tool world, we're on polar opposites. You've got absolute crap, the footprint hand plane, unfortunately Buck Brothers, Buck Brothers used to be a great company. Vintage stuff is great, but go to Home Depot now and buy a Bruck Brothers hand plane and you just have a paperweight, you know? So there doesn't seem to be any other alternative other than Veritas, you know, Lee Nielsen. I guess Lee Nielsen is now middle of the road because you've got Sauer and Steiner sitting out there.
Yeah,
Ron
you've got
Breeze,
the
you know,
super
on the
premiums.
other side of things.
Yeah.
I think Wood River is probably the place to be there. I mean, and if you are a Buy American through and through, then it's not an option for you because it's a Chinese knockoff manufactured tool. So from the power tool perspective, it's interesting because I never really thought of like Porter Cable or DeWalt. And it's funny because those are all the same company. He's like, I respect these companies. And
it's all one company.
Porter Cable, DeWalt,
yeah,
Delta.
It's all under the same parent.
It's headquartered down the street from me in Towson, Maryland. Great funny. Place. But it's, you know, I guess they have levels within it. Like Black & Decker was kind of like the lower end of things. DeWalt was always that contractor professional grade type thing. Porter Cable was right there with DeWalt, I think, you know. When you get to handheld power tools, I think they're kind of all in the same spot. You know, you have, I guess, Harbor Freight brand, but I've been into one Harbor Freight in my life. I didn't even realize there was one nearby me until like a couple months ago. So call me, I guess I'm a Harbor Freight snob, but I never really drew the distinction. I kind of always crapped on Craftsman just because, you know, I don't know.
Well, who doesn't?
Just because I've had bad experiences with it. That's why.
Yeah, of course.
I had a Craftsman miter saw that I could not get square or plumb no matter what I did, you know. But I've had great experiences with DeWalt tools, and I've never really thought of them as low grade. I just thought they were the solution, you know. When you get into handheld power tools, Festool certainly I think would be at the upper end of things. Everything else kind of sits in the same boat, if you ask me. You know, Bosch.
That's very interesting. You're totally right. It isn't that, you know, the middle class is the main class, and then there's one outlier.
Yeah, I mean, can you think of Festool? Certainly, is there another router? Hitachi? No,
probably not in the routers, but there are things like what's that other company? Mafel, or is that how you pronounce that? Mafel?
Yeah,
right.
That's a German company too. Maybe it's just the Germans.
I mean, I'm just looking right now. Toolnut has their jigsaw for $765. They've got a track saw that's $870. So we're definitely talking about, you know, Festool level pricing. And I know I've heard a lot of good things about their quality, but you know, it's price wise, it's on par with the Festool stuff. So aside from those two, maybe there's some other obscure company. You're right, in that portable power tool market, there just isn't anything for that. You go back to like Todd's his message about the miter saw. This is the type of tooling we're talking about, that those people working in other people's homes who need those portable tools, they're all working in those mid-range tools, and it's only a select few. I mean, I'm sure there's enough out there. I saw a guy working on the house across the street using a Capex. They're out there, but I think at least in the U.S., they favor most of the traditional, what we're in this conversation calling mid-range construction brands.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose once you start to get into stationary power tools, the game changes, and that's where the, you know, but and that's where you could look at Delta. See, I hate to call Delta a middle. I had a Delta table saw for years. Fantastic tool. You know, it was a contractor saw, so maybe that's the distinction. You know, cabinet, contractor, benchtop. But
yeah, I think those same mid-range companies, again, we're thinking contractor. There's not as much use for a full-size cabinet saw.
Right,
so
exactly.
All those companies are making your portable job site saws and contractor saws. But then you go to companies like, you know, your Powermatics, and there are quite a few of these companies who have their toes in that higher end. I guess you call it a higher end, but they don't do as much in the contractor grade space. Yeah.
Well, that gets interesting too, because you can look at Grizzly and go, okay, price-wise, they're, I guess, the lower end. But the fact of the matter is, you have a 20-inch Powermatic planer, right?
15.
15. Okay. Well, I have the 20-inch Grizzly. If I had the 15-inch Grizzly, forget about the size. It's the same planer. It's got a different motor. You have a Baldor US-made motor on that?
Probably.
That's and a gold paint job. it's the exact same body design. It probably was assembled in the same plant.
They all seem to come out of the same factory
with a different coat of paint, basically. You know, so you look at those differences, and I don't know, man. Price is the only difference, and maybe there's a little bit different quality issue, fit and finish on the Powermatic. But I mean, this Grizzly thing I've got is a beast, and it's a well put together machine. It was like dead nuts on. I even bought a feeler gauge, and I kicked myself because I didn't need it, because it was already set up.
Right.
You know, I'm sure results may vary, but you know, is there such a thing as a middle of the road stationary power tool?
Yeah, and I think you would only be able to do that by outlining the prices. Like, I don't even know that this is a reflection on quality, but you could look at the most expensive. Let's say let's just look at table saws. You're looking at your Saw Stop as one of the more expensive. But then we have the same problem where there's a big jump, if you want to call it. I'm not going to call it super premium because it's kind of just a different format. But what if you jump into the world of sliders and you look at a Felder, for instance, which is significantly more expensive and higher quality, generally speaking, than all of the brands that we have to work with here in the U.S. as like cabinet grade standard cabinet saws.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I think it's less of a middle road, high road, and more of demographic. You know, when we look at those handheld power tools, they are targeted for the Todd Clippingers of the world, the guys on a job site turning out good quality stuff, you know, so they need a repeatable, precise tool that is affordable and is mobile. You know, and then you get into like the shop-based craftsmen who, if they're on a production line, if it's a high-end, high production type thing, like a millwork house, they're going up to a different model just because it's about production. It's about speed. It's about, you know, durability. You get to the independent furniture maker or maybe cabinet shop, and that's a totally different use case. So it's a demographic issue more than low, medium, and high quality, I think.
Now, I think we kind of veered off on a tangent here a little bit. So to kind of get back to what who was it, Christopher? What Christopher was asking, when you're looking at those middle ground tools, it's kind of a crapshoot. And you look at the reviews, and what winds up happening is people who like a brand really like a brand. Right. So the person who loves their DeWalt sliding compound miter saw thinks that Makita is crap. And the guy who owns the Makita and has had good luck with that thinks that the DeWalt is crap. So reviews are not really helpful. The way I look at it is most of these tools, as long as you avoid the bottom of the barrel, like you said, the Harbor Freight stuff, if you spend a decent amount of money, you get a name brand, you are probably not going to be totally unhappy with the tool. We're talking about creature comfort, minor differences between all of those middle of the road sort of brands. You know, so I don't think you can go wrong with either one. Honestly, my best advice, pick your favorite color. Go with that. You like yellow? Good. You like green? Go with that. Do you have a very noisy cricket? Or is that at my house? Nope, it's not here. I hear repeatedly.
Yeah, I hear it.
It sounds like a cricket who is having a really good time.
Yeah, I think it's just outside my window. All
right, I'll let you go hunt him down. Come here, cricket.
Let me
whoa. Get Kenny to go find a cricket.
I've got a 3-pound mallet. I'll go find that cricket.
There you go. All right, so if you want to send us voicemails, either for questions or kickback, you can do that. Just use your voice memo app and send that file to woodtalkonline@gmail.com. And now there's a little bit of this.
Shannon's Lumber Industry Update.
Sing it, Shannon.
Woohoo! This is a quick one this week. Obviously, unless you've been hiding on a rock, you're very well aware that we are in hurricane season. Hurricane Harvey was terrible. Hurricane Irma looks terribler. And what is it? Jose sitting out there building steam, and Katya sitting inside building steam. We're in hurricane season, which means plywood is in very, very short supply. The plus, when you add to that the import plywood tariffs on Chinese plywood and things, there's been a general shortage of that material to begin with. So it's kind of forgive the expression, a perfect storm of plywood availability right now. We have actually just kind of rerouted just about every truck we have down the coast filled with nothing but marine grade plywood. And we still have people calling and screaming, going, I need more, to the point where we're actually sending like the really good stuff, like the boat builders use to board up buildings, because it's all that is available, which is a really dangerous thing, because that stuff made in French mills and things, they have lower production quotas anyway, because of just the level of detail and stuff that goes into those sheets. So if you find that you are unfortunately in a situation where you're in the path of this storm and you're going to need some plywood, you better go get it now. If you think that it might miss you, if you're sitting up in Georgia and the Carolinas thinking, well, you might be okay, I might need this later, I would advise you to go get it now. And you may have to get creative on where you're looking for it. I think you will also find that a lot of the traditional companies that do nothing but wholesale, they're going to be dropping those things. This is becoming like humanitarian effort more than anything else. We just got to get the materials into the area as fast as we can, before you can't access it at all. So just be very, very aware that plywood of all shapes, marine plywood, hardwood plywood, crappy Chinese plywood, it's going to be gone. So get it now.
Do you find that there's opportunistic price gouging that happens with this?
Oh, yes.
That's terrible.
Now, there are laws in place, anti-gouging laws and things like that are in place. But we've run into a couple instances in some of the calls that we made, because our tack has been, look, we've got a truck coming that way anyway. We're going to put plywood on it, but do you kind of want to call dibs? In other words, it's going to show up. There's going to be plywood there. If you want some, it'd be better to tell us right now so that we can earmark some of it for you. And we've had a lot of instances of people who have been like, yeah, in fact, triple my order. It's like, do you need that much plywood? Oh, I'm going to be able to sell it. And I'm like, come on now. Easy now. And we've certainly seen, heard feedback, I should say, from people down in Texas, and certainly people down in Florida, and most definitely in the islands, that the prices have just gone ridiculously through. I mean, plywood in the islands is really expensive anyway, just because you got to stick it on a boat to get it there. But yeah, you're going to see it, and it's really unfortunate. But I think most of the above the board companies, they're not going to do that, because it's just talk about ruining a reputation, ruining a relationship.
It's really, really bad PR.
So it's just one of those things where we in the Amazon world tend to think, no big deal, add to cart and it'll show up. I think in the hand tool world, we're a little bit more used to buying something and waiting 6 months for that boutique tool to show up. But the construction trade is not used to going, I have to wait. What now?
Right.
I got 4 trim carpenters showing up tomorrow. And I think the general public is so used to the instant gratification, next day shipping Amazon thing, that it will come as a major shock to people that they can't actually, not only do they have to wait, it's just not possible.
The stuff's not there.
I mean, at some point, access is going to be an issue. So there'll be no trucks coming or going. It's really scary. And I'm hoping that we can get ahead of it enough. But that Chinese plywood tariff really could not have come at the wrong time, at a worse time, because that's generally the stuff, the cheap stuff that goes up on the sides of the buildings. That's what goes in instead of marine fur and things like that. So be safe, people. And Tom Iovino, if you're listening, buddy, good work, man.
Yeah, he's all up in that. That man is busy this time of year.
He's emergency preparing. Idness is all of Florida.
Yeah, crazy. You know what's crazy? All the years that we've done a show together, we have never once had you have a cricket problem.
And now that's all you can hear.
And it's driving me nuts. It's really, I don't know if it goes into the recording that way, but at least into my headphones, it's like there's a cricket on top of your head. It's like scratching his little legs. Now I can't hear you. No. Keep your volume where it is. Don't change your levels. We'll figure it out. We'll get through it. It's probably not as bad as it is for me listening to it, but
see, I've got my monitor turned way back, so I'm hearing it through my headphones, so it must be loud.
Yeah. Okay. Well, enough about that stupid cricket. Let's get into the email here. First one I have is from Joe. He says, "Hey guys, love the show. I'm a firefighter and my firehouse needs a new kitchen table. This is something that between the other guys and myself, we have the skills and tools to build. However, my question is about the size. On a daily basis, we have 11 guys at the table for meals, and it's tight quarters. When we have visitors or ride alongside people, we have to eat at the kitchen counter, and they get made fun of for eating at the little kids' table. We want to build a table that will fit 14 comfortably and 16 in a pinch. How big should this be? Is there a standard width per person that we should plan on? Recommendation on length to width proportions should we take into account? Thanks for your input. FYI, this tabletop will probably be made out of honey locust log that I cut down that we will chainsaw mill. Also, if you have any tips about working with 14 to 16-foot honey locust boards, that would be appreciated as well. Last thing first, I have no tips, but it sounds big, and get some help to move those things around. But as far as proportions and size, this is something that Cremona did a really good job of covering this in the farmhouse table build that he did in the guild. So some of this information comes from that. Some of it comes from other things that I've researched. So as far as a recommendation, there is a per person figure that you could play with, but it's a range. Cremona's recommendation was 29 inches per person at a table, and that's pretty generous, right? So that's if you're doing like a really nice large dining room situation. You want everybody to have plenty of room for maybe even multiple plates and their drinks and utensils and all that stuff. Something's crawling up my leg. Okay. So Shannon, get off my leg. 29 inches per person is very generous, and you could reduce down to probably at the low end 18 inches per person. That's going to be pretty tight. So you have a range there. I read another article that said for restaurants where this stuff is standardized because of occupancy limitations and things like that, tell Kenny if he's going to do something to make himself useful, get that damn cricket.
Go eat the cricket.
Go eat the cricket. So if you are looking at a bar, for instance, they allow 24 inches per bar stool. So you need at least that much length to accommodate a certain number of bar stools. So I think 24, in your situation, you're probably talking about big guys eating, throwing food around like a bunch of maniacs.
Big beefy firemen.
Big beefy firemen all eating with your shirts off and your hairy chests. I know what this is like. I've been there before. So I think 18 is going to be a little bit tight. 29, who knows? I don't know how big the space is that you have, but that sounds pretty generous. If you do the math on that, that's a big, big table. I would back it down to that 24. I think 24, we're not talking about, a restaurant experience here. We're talking about a bunch of guys getting some food so they can go out and do some stuff. So if you calculate it at 24, each side could accommodate 7 people. And then if you need the extra 2 people, that's a total of 14 people. If you need the extra 2, you've got the ends. You could always pull up another chair, have them sit at the ends. So that's what I would aim for. That's about, at 24 inches, that's about 14 feet long. The other dimension is the width. And again, going back to Cremona's recommendation, 32 inches is going to give you a very tight table, intimate. You're going to be in people's faces pretty much. 44 inches at the top end is going to be a very wide table. If you're doing like family style food on there, that might be good because then you could have each person's plate plus the serving plates and things in the center. So there's your ranges, 32 to 44. And then of course on the other end, 18 to 29. So use those as a basis with the space you're putting this into and the material you have to see if you can't come up with an appropriate number.
Yeah, if you look at like smaller dining tables, like a dining table you would put in like an apartment dining room, they use that 18-inch measure, and it gets pretty tight. If you go, I would say never go below that because it's just then it's a kid's table.
It is, yeah.
But it'll get pretty tight. But I also find that the depth measurement, 18 is a good measurement there as far as your reach in front of you. And then if you add like space in the middle, like another 12 inches to throw in the middle to put the plates, family style dining, the runner, the candles, the fruit centerpiece, whatever it is.
Which we fully expect on a firehouse lunch table.
Absolutely.
A runner and some fruit and candles.
A nice silk runner and an axe. Just a big axe right in the middle.
Yeah.
You need a little bit of space in the middle there. So add 10, 12 inches to that 36 and suddenly you're in that 44, 46 range.
Yeah. This is a big table, no matter what you do. Yeah. It's going to be a big one.
No doubt.
All right.
Out of nice light locust.
Yes.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is.
Right on.
Well, they're big, burly, hairy firemen, so it's fine.
Yeah. Just make sure you can get it through the door to the room.
That's true.
That you're going into.
Always consider that.
Yeah. Let's see. This one comes from Dave. He says, I'm going to start working more with hand tools, particularly chisels and planes, and I'm looking at buying a Work Sharp 3000 to sharpen them because I don't have the patience to sit and hone with stones. Have you heard or have any experience with this tool? I have had experience with that tool. I had a Work Sharp for 4 or 5 years, and I put it as graduate to stones, but that makes some sort of intimation that the Work Sharp is less than stones. It's just an entirely different method. Essentially, it's a scary sharp sandpaper method. It will give you a flat bevel. It's highly repeatable. And since I owned it, they've added all kinds of little bells and whistle add-on things. You can, they had the plain blade, like wider plain blade thing that sat on top. I never tried that, but it's really easy. I mean, it's a great entry point. If you don't have any experience sharpening, you can get a strop, you can get all kinds of different, grits. And if I remember correctly, they had even an add-on now that does knives and like draw knives and things like that. So the biggest issue I had with it was very limited on what types of tools that I could use. Now, not so much anymore. So I say go for it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And in my experience, the resale value was really good. When I decided to get rid of it, I don't think I lost any money on the deal.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so we have one question we're going to share since there's no Cremona in the house. We're going to take a question here from Gabe Buckner. By the way, Gabe is a very high Patreon level supporter, and he's actually at that producer level. So when he asks a question, Shannon and I we jump on it because we're serious about this. He says, how do you charge for commission work? Do you charge half up front and wait until the project is completed? What about a project completion timeline? How do you explain it to the client? Now, I think both of us can say we haven't really done a lot of client work in recent years. Is that true for you as well?
Yeah.
But, if I were to do it, nothing really changes in this regard. A lot of what happens with charging and doing work for clients, especially if you're new at it, you just don't necessarily have the experience. And I can fully admit early on how many times I mispriced projects and I misestimated my project in terms of time and how long it would take. And by the time I actually did the math, I would look at my per hour price and I'd be like, I just made $2 an hour, and that is a matter of experience. And if you don't have that experience, you are kind of flying blind, because if you can't look at a project and, fairly accurately estimate how long it's going to take, that's not something you necessarily need to explain to the client. You could always say, yeah, I think a professional way to approach it is like, hey, I'm a one-man shop. This is a custom project. There's always little things that could give us hiccups in a timeline, but you give them a range, and maybe that range is plus or minus a week, or plus or minus a couple of days. If you can't narrow it down that much, then I don't want this to sound harsh, but you might not be ready to take on clients yet. You should be able to give a rough approximation and meet that deadline. Because now we're not talking about, hey, let's just go in the shop and have some fun. You are taking money for a project and you need to represent yourself in a very professional way. So yeah, give yourself a little bit of slack, but make sure that, you understand this person's paying money. There's an expectation of service and an expectation that you know what you're doing. So that's usually how I handle it. I do let them know that there are things that can happen to delay a project, but my anticipated completion time is this. As far as
I think there should be a fair amount of time put into that planning as well. I mean, whether you're charging or not, if you're always going to do better, the more you can kind of break down that project and get as granular as you want. Mm-hmm. How long is this going to take me? And in fact, I find that I stay on task more, the more like specific I get. And if I get to a point where it's like I have a task and I can't estimate how long it's going to take, I probably haven't broken it down enough. Yeah. So that may be an area where if you find you're like, I don't know how long it'll take me to cut those dovetails. Well, what are the steps to cutting the dovetails for that drawer, and start to kind of break it down that way. And if nothing else, it's going to keep you on track and just make you more efficient, because at this point, it's all about hourly rate, right? Labor time. So you want to get as close to it as you possibly can. And then a lot of people, the customers that I deal with day in and day out, they always tell me I double it. I take that number and I double it. And for the most part, they seem to be okay with that. I've got one guy that says he will automatically triple it, but he says usually the customer balks and then it's kind of that, lead high type
thing.
Him
the discount.
The customer will balk and then he backs off to something around double the time.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, I when I was doing this more routinely and trying to acquire clients, I didn't think this smart about it. And it's over the years, oddly enough, doing guild projects, I will take a calendar, I just print out a blank calendar, and I lay out each day what tasks I think I can accomplish in that project on that day. And once I lay it all out, and I'm generous, I'm giving myself extra time. If I think it takes a day, I'm going to give myself a day and a half. And as long as I keep doing that, I could look at the calendar and say, well, I should be done with this project by this time. As long as you're honest with yourself and you know how long these things will take, break it down the way Shannon said, but put that breakdown onto an actual calendar. And you should be able to see. And if I were doing a client job now, that's exactly what I would do. And I learned that from scheduling projects for the guild.
No doubt. Like filming has been the best thing for me being like organized and task focused. Yeah. And the more you can break it down and add a really fat beat to the back of it, the more productive you're going to be.
Break it down. Okay. So the other question is about money. Do you charge up front or wait till the project's completed? For me, and I guess this is going to be a personal thing, I always charge 50% up front, and then I wind up collecting the last check at the time of delivery. For me, the pricing had always worked out so that 50% covers my material cost and then some. So that if worst case scenario, you get totally stiffed, you at least haven't lost money on it. So you actually had the materials paid for, plus a little bit of your time and effort, and then you get stiffed, and now you actually still have the ownership of the project that you could then sell to someone else, hopefully. That's worst case scenario. That really hasn't ever happened to me, but it was always that just in case sort of thing. But I think most clients are comfortable giving you a 50% deposit and then giving you the rest when the project is completed.
Yeah, I think the key there, and I've gotten bitten by this, is I've heard, deposit to cover materials. Mm-hmm. That's not enough.
Right.
Just enough to cover those materials. You'll end up in a situation where now you've just covered the materials. Well, whoop-de-doo, you can't sell them back. Like if you started, sawing into it, you can't take that lumber back. Yeah. So if the customer bails, you're out all of it, essentially, unless you can find a way to repurpose that lumber, which may or may not be possible. But yeah, and I think 50% is pretty market common.
I think the other thing is the project you're actually making. If it's something extremely custom that you probably could not resell if that person just kind of bails on you, then you might consider taking a larger deposit. If it's something that you're just making a little occasional table or something that you probably could move pretty easily, maybe you can get away with taking a smaller deposit because you still have value in that final thing that you use the lumber to make in the first place. So
yeah. Yeah, good point.
All right, hope that helps you, Gabe. And that's going to wrap it up for the show here. So you can leave us an iTunes review if you want to. That always helps us out. We appreciate it. You could support the show at Patreon, patreon.com/woodtalk, or you could pick up a Wood Talk t-shirt at twwstore.com. And Shannon, why don't you give them the contact info and we'll get out of here.
Sure. If you have comments, questions, topic suggestions, or you want to chime in on our little format change and tell us how much you disapprove,
please don't.
We will happily not listen to it.
I feel bad enough.
Just remember, it's all Mark's fault. No, it's not. It's Matt's fault. He's not here.
You're right.
It's all Matt's fault.
It is Matt's fault. He's traveling so much, he just can't do the show.
Right. So anyway, we welcome your feedback. We welcome your questions. Create a voice memo using your voice memo app on your smarty phone thing and send it to woodtalkonline@gmail.com. You can use our contact form at woodtalkshow.com/contact. And you can always just go to woodtalkshow.com. This particular episode, scroll to the bottom, enter a comment, and state your piece. Mm-hmm. We're on Instagram. You gotta love Instagram. Wood Talk Show on Instagram. We're at Wood Talk Show on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. We are everywhere at Wood Talk Show. So
yeah. That. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and we will catch you next time.
See you. Bye. Goodbye. That was my Matt.
Like that. That's very funny. Everything's funny to me.
That was good.
You like that?
Yeah.
All right. Too bad that didn't make it into the recording.
Walking Dead Season 7 is now on Netflix.
What? I got bored of that show, man.
Yeah, I just waited until it came out for free.
So that's the best way to do it. I got to go. I still got to catch up on the comics. I'm like 10 issues behind.
Oh, I'm like 30 now. That's terrible.
It definitely is a book that's better read in trade paperbacks if you can. Just big chunks of the story. Otherwise, you're just like, the story just goes just inches along with each
I just
issue.
needed to change, and I like went all indie for a while, and
Yeah.
I've been reading just weird stuff like from the depths of comicsology, and then I went like Spider-Man crazy for a while and like reread everything, and
Yeah.
I'll get back to Walking Dead at some point.
People are sympathizing with Matt in the chat room.
What?
See, that's Jim's got it right. He said it's not a cricket, it's Cremona rubbing his hairy hindquarters together, asking to be let into the show.
That is really loud when I take my headphones off. I don't even know where that is. It's
I know.
like filling the whole room.
That's the thing. It's probably in a corner somewhere, but the reverberation, you will not be able to find that damn thing.
It doesn't sound like it's in here. It sounds like it's on the other side of the door somewhere.
You know what you got? You got to set off like one of those raid bombs or whatever in there just to kill everything. Just don't leave Kenny in there.
Yeah, what's the point of having a dog if you can't hunt down the cricket?
Hunt down a damn cricket, dog. All right.
He's laying on the floor eating a Gucci Benabone.
Okay, so folks who are listening live, the show we just recorded is going to be released Monday as our regular Monday show, and now we are going to transport you so far into the future to be the next Monday after that. So like a week and 3 days or so.
Is that the 18th?
In the future. Yeah, it's a good question. What is it? I have the show date here. Yeah, so September 18th.
Wow.
Is when you will hear this be released. So you guys are actually getting a little bit of an early preview here. We'll see how this second show format goes. Hopefully it'll work out.
I feel like we should have some sort of like time travel sound effect.
We should. A little bit of a Wayne's World. All right. Okay, I've got the file up. I think we're ready to roll. Freaking cricket. It's really distracting. I hope it doesn't come out in the recording.
Man, that's loud. I just thought you were crazy. But...
No, it's picking up. And he's very, he has crescendos. He likes to really ramp it up, and then he takes a break.
You sure you don't want me to check my levels back?
No, because if you do that, then it's going to jack up everything else.
I could get real close. Turn it back.
That scares me. Let's not do that. Okay. Or let's wing this this weird format. We'll see how it goes.
Welcome to Wood Talk. Now here are three guys who, if combined, would make one hell of a woodworker. Mark, Shannon, and Matt.
That is so true. One day, the three of us will join forces like a giant robot to be one great robotic woodworker.
Station.
That day is not today, though. Okay, so welcome to Wood Talk number 409 for September 18th, 2017. On today's show, we're talking about intentionally building things out of square, the necessity of miter saws, and it's a topic we just can't get away from, adding texture, choosing a router plane, and introducing new woodworkers to tools. We should mention that today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Brusso Hardware. You want to check out their Photo Extra newsletter. It's really, really good. It's a weekly update from Brusso dedicated to customer-submitted photos. Brusso's customers work on detailed projects including ring boxes, humidors, keepsakes, gun boxes, and furniture. It's an excellent source of inspiration for your next project. The newsletter is short, quick, and has great photos and is delivered right to your inbox. To sign up, visit brusso.com/photoextra. That's all one word, brusso.com/photoextra. Thank you so much, Brusso. We love you guys. Keep doing what you do, making the best hardware in the world. That's what I'm saying. You know what I'm talking about? In the world. All right. So, a little bit of a different format, kind of a loose format. We're going to focus on questions today. Nothing for, what's new or what's on the bench, because we're actually recording at the same time as we did at the previous show, so there's nothing to add to that.
What's new? A cricket.
No, that's not new. That was in the last show, too. If that cricket was dead, then it would be something new. Okay. So let's just jump right into it, shall we? I've got a question here from Nick Carruthers. He says, Mark, in response to your Instagram picture of your garden gate install using the woodpecker square for reference, I got a lot of funny comments about that, by the way. Was it difficult to intentionally build something that's that far out of square? Did you have to premedicate yourself if you had to use mismatched chisels to make it? Would that have sent you over the edge? Now, I know he's in jest here, but it's a really good question. Building out of square. Now, you talk to someone who does installs and on-site builds, and they would be like, "What's the problem?" Like everything I do, square is like just
So
not an issue.
day.
Yeah, exactly. Another day on the job site. For someone who is isolated to a shop where I live in this imaginary bubble where everything is flat, square, perfectly parallel, coplanar. Like that's my goal, is to get all those reference surfaces in line with one another. Building something out of square is weird. And I think the biggest challenge with it is thinking of downstream complexities and things that may happen because of that. So even if you figure out like, okay, in this case, it's a garden gate, I'm going to make this taper. I'm going to make sure that this goes in this way. And then you have to stop and think, well, what happens when it swings open though? Does that change the way this door swings? Am I going to, is it going to contact the patio as I push it all the way to, its full extension? So there are other things you really have to think about, downstream stuff that just isn't really that much of a concern, or I guess maybe I'm used to it in regular furniture building. I know how to anticipate those things. But when going out of square, it is weird. It's just uncomfortable. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I keep looking at it and I know it's out of square, so it kind of drives me nuts. So that's why when I put the pictures up, I put the first one up there with no reference point, and all you see is the gate. And I built it specifically so that I would try to hide the fact that it is not square. And it worked. The vast majority of people had no idea. You had a couple people who were like, yeah, I think I could have sworn I saw something, but I thought it was the camera angle or the lens playing tricks.
Yeah, sure you did.
And that's what I found, like, oh, okay, sure, of course. That's why you didn't say anything before, right? Yeah. But ultimately, it was a successful thing because most people did not see it. And then when I put a big old red square on it, it was very obvious. In fact, there were a few people, I'm pretty sure, because it's the internet, so you never know. I'm pretty sure they were accusing me, like, as if I was making a joke. Like, I took the square and I actually made it out of square and put it on the gate and said, hey, look how out of square my gate is. Yuck, yuck, yuck. And
yeah, because why not do that with a super expensive woodpecker limited run tool?
Yeah, that thing is set up and I'm not touching it until I have to. So ultimately, it did seem like it was a successful venture in building out of square. But I will tell you, it was weird and confusing, and I'm not even sure how I feel about it at this point. But the gate is there. I think what would have pleased me as a builder would have been to simply shim out and change the shape of what I'm putting this into so that I could build a square gate. But that was actually a much, much harder and more involved process. So I backed down to this out of square sort of thing. Yeah.
I find it interesting because I've had this conversation a lot with folks in the hand tool school, and square is kind of completely irrelevant when you're not setting fences and you're not like setting blade angles and you're just working to a line, So I don't know. Like I was having a conversation about making compound angled cuts, and it's like, a square cut is still an angle.
Yeah.
90-degree angle.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of kind of adjusting your perspective or possibly adjusting the wood so that you're sawing perfectly vertically. But I find that when I'm working out of square, it's a matter of just kind of, now my square is my bevel gauge. And I just set the bevel gauge, or 4 bevel gauges, depending on how many angles there are. Yeah. And that is now my gold standard. And I just work to that. And it is kind of a mindset shift. But when you're not working with set fences and things like that, taking the wood to the tool, but more the tool to the wood, it kind of becomes irrelevant in my experience. So I don't know. This question struck me as odd because I was like, what do you mean? Why is that weird? Yeah, well, I do that all the time, not on purpose. Just
that was another response I got a lot. Like, I do this all the time. I just didn't mean to do it. It was interesting. A couple people had made responses like, square is sort of a relative and also maybe like a human brain construct where most of the world is much more chaotic than that, and things are not necessarily in nature perfectly straight, perfectly square. I mean, there are some interesting things in nature that would boggle your mind that are like geometrically accurate, but I do think that it is sort of a evolved human natural instinct to bring order to things. And one of those things is what allows proportions to look right and certain proportions to look wrong, and something that's out of square relative to something else being less pleasing than something that is square, coplanar, straight, whatever these things are. So it's, I could see an argument on both sides saying, hey, embrace the chaos. If it's not perfectly square, who cares? Who says things have to be that way? But I think it's our sort of evolved monkey brains that say, no, this makes sense. We want to see this order. This is pleasing to the human condition. It's like, but I think it is something that is a result of our evolution and how complex our brains are at this point.
Yeah, but then you add the design elements of negative space and asymmetry to that equation, and none of it makes sense. So,
right.
Sorry.
All bets are off. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, building out a square. So, yeah, I don't want to do it again. I can tell you that much.
We find it an interesting conversation. If you don't, then sorry.
Then why are you listening to this show?
Yeah,
this is the kind of crap we talk about here.
Yeah, go. Let's talk about router planes. How about that?
Yeah, let's
that
do
sounds
it.
much better.
I like that.
This is from. This is what it says. Tats Matt. I like it.
Tats Matt.
Oh no, sorry.
No, that's a sentence.
That's the end. It says awesome.
Yeah, it's an entire sentence. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well then I have no idea who this is from because apparently I left it off. So we're just gonna say it's from Steve.
Okay.
It's from Bill.
A guy.
Yeah, some guy named Bill. He says, I am after a router plane and I'm not sure if I should go an open or closed throat. I've not read too much about the difference and when and why make options. Wow, this is terrible. I don't know which one to get and what's it like working with each and what size blades to start with. So the key to look at is start very simple. So let's go backwards on this. Whatever blade it comes with, go with that. Generally, a lot of them come with a 1/4 inch blade. Some of them come with a 1/2 inch blade, depending on the size that you get. I think if I were to have 2 blades, it would be a 1/4 inch blade and a 1/2 inch blade, because for the most part, I'm using a router plane. A router plane, again, is not for creating joinery. It's for refining already cut joinery. Mm-hmm. You could create a dado with it, but that's super slow. It's not good. You want to have the dado pretty much already done and then come in and flatten it out, which is why it's like a #1 hybrid woodworking tool, right? It's the perfect thing to come back and fix your table saw cut dado or something like that. So you're taking a very, very light cut. Most of our joinery is going to fall into that kind of 1/4 and 1/2 inch range, or slightly more or slightly less than one of those. So, 3/4 inch joinery can very easily be cleaned up with a 1/2 inch router plane blade. A 3/4 inch router plane blade tends to be a little too much steel to try to push. That blade is hanging down below the sole. It's totally unsupported. So you end up having to take a really, really light cut when you get to a blade that's much bigger than a 1/2 inch. So I say 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch is a good place to start. As far as open throat and closed throat, get both. No.
Why stop at one?
The open throat is going to give you a lot more visibility in what you're working on. Closed throat is going to give you a lot more stability because there's more sole to reference on the work. My personal preference is for a closed throat. I like the extra stability, especially if one side is hanging off, if I'm like trimming a tenon cheek or something and I've got a whole half of that router is like hanging off in space over the tenon cheek. I like to have that area closed throat. An open throat, it's very difficult to do that. The plane becomes very, very tippy. Second of all, visibility is less of a concern for me because, again, the joint, whatever it is already mostly formed. So there's some sort of shoulder or wall to the dado that I can play bumper pool and work my way down. I don't need to see. I can close my eyes and just bounce my way down the dado. It's all about the stability more than anything else. Second of all, if you're working on a narrow piece, say you're doing some router plane work on the edge of a door, the closed throat is entirely ineffective. That closed throat just kind of straddles it and you can't use it at all. So there are reasons for greater visibility if you're doing really, really precise, think like really delicate stringing inlay or something like that. The open throat is a great idea for that, which is why I have an open throat router plane. It gets used specifically for that. The rest of the time, I'm using a closed throat plane. It's just better. I'm just gonna put it that way. It's just better.
So I think what he's got to be thinking in his mind, Lee Nielsen or Veritas.
Probably.
This. Most people who are contemplating this decision are looking at both, and it looks like Lee Nielsen offers both closed and open throat. I'm going to say if I'm assuming that's his decision he's trying to make, if he is making the decision, hands down, as much as I like Lee Nielsen, I think the Veritas router plane is the one to go with, and that is a closed. The reason
it's
for
got
that,
a lot more extendability to it.
Totally, yeah. And you can choose a really wide selection of blades. They have a ton of different blades ranging, and also metric as well, ranging from a 1/16 to 3/4. And you could oh, thank you. This is the kind of service I pay for here. Nicole just brought me a fresh water. Thank you, Ann.
Wow.
I actually texted her because my throat's dry. I'm parched. but you can actually mount the blade backwards on the plane, and it effectively is operating like an open throat plane.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. I was thinking of it as like a bullnose plane, but you're right. It's now an open throat plane.
Yep.
Hey, all right. So I have a Lee Nielsen router plane up for sale all of a sudden.
So that's why I think, because of the multiple blades you can buy, and the fact that you could just reverse the orientation of the blade and go backwards, the Veritas version is just a no-brainer when you're comparing the two.
I do think they've gone a little overboard.
Yeah, maybe.
Some respects.
Well, you mean the Bluetooth speaker that's included in the handle?
Yeah. I mean, the router plane is getting very close to one of their April Fool's jokes at this point with the number of bolt-on options they have. But
yeah, you got a little micrometer on the top so you can get down to the nearest thousandth. Yeah, a little digital display.
Yeah. But they're
there.
really thin blades. They have like 1/8 inch, 16th inch blades now. So awesome. It's so nice to have that option now.
Yeah, so. I agree. Okie doke. Next question here is from, who's it from? Ryan. So this question is geared toward Mark, and this is like the third show in a row we're talking about miter saws, but I don't know, I think it's interesting. He says, "Hi guys, question geared toward Mark. Recently you addressed a question from a caller, emailer about miter saws, specifically the accuracy of sliding saws. Also, I wasn't able to attend live, but I did watch the recent Guild live show focused on the necessity of miter saws in fine woodworking shops. A couple questions related to this topic. One, you mentioned that the Capex changed your approach to the miter saw. So would you go back to it? Having experienced the Bosch and the Makita and the battery-powered DeWalt, do you now consider the Capex one of the necessity Festool tools? Is the Capex the solution to the miter saw question?" So this goes back to an article that I wrote explaining why I moved away from some Festool stuff, and I really just pared my collection down to the things that I felt were true game changers, things that truly made a difference, and owning them just made my life that much easier and better. And the Capex was one of the things to go, because my logic was any miter saw can cut. If set up and calibrated properly, it will cut and it will do the job that I need it to do, as long as I avoid like the bottom end. And so far that's been true. But what happened was the Capex was just so darn good and reliable, and the cut quality was so good that I started to change my perspective on crosscuts. I started to do a lot less at the table saw with my sleds and miter gauge, and started to use the miter saw for that, just because it's so fast and so easy. You just throw the wood up there and boom, you're done. So at this point, when I evaluate this, am I going back to the Capex? The answer is no, because one of the other reasons why I moved away from Festool where it wasn't crucial was because I wanted to have a tool collection that was a little bit closer to what the average person watching my show would have, which means having some of those mid-range, Bosch, DeWalt's, these companies we're familiar with in that range. So I think the Capex miter saw, it's really an outlier in all of this. So yeah, it does the job a little bit better, but if I'm trying to be a little bit closer to what everyone else does, then I should be doing most of my crosscuts, my critical crosscuts, at the table saw, and then using the miter saw for, rough cutting, or if I need to do some crazy angles and, crown molding or something like that. So I don't see that as a good reason to go back to the Capex. I think it would further push me away from my ultimate goal with what I'm doing here. So secondly, the Bosch and Makita are 12-inch saws. Is this a size you'd recommend? Does the 10-inch capacity of the Capex limit the saw's advantages over the table saw? Currently have a Hitachi miter saw, which is extremely accurate and user-friendly, but the dust collection is just terrible. Looking at the Capex, but would love your thoughts. Okay, so if you're going for dust collection, you don't really have much choice. The Capex is kind of it. The Bosch is... Bosch makes like an attempt at dust collection, but without modification, it's not very good. And the Makita, the newest one that has great dust collection, which is why I bought it, has manufacturing flaws that have not been addressed yet. So I would steer very clear of the new Makita for now until they get that crap worked out. So 10-inch is fine. I think the Capex was designed in such a way to really harness as much of that 10-inch as possible, where in many cases, the capacity of the Capex, even at only 10-inch, is actually close to what most run-of-the-mill 12-inch saws can do. So look at those numbers, and you'll see it's actually surprisingly good in terms of capacity. What you're describing here, though, Ryan, it sounds like you should buy a Capex. Just when the way you're talking about these things, you're looking for that increased dust collection. You're looking for that additional accuracy and precision. You can get some of these things from the other tools, but it sounds like you're already like 90% there, and you just need that little pink, that little push. I am not anti-Capex by any means. I think you'll be perfectly happy with it.
Right. It's okay to like Festool.
Yeah.
Get it.
So I would say that if that's where you're leading with this, don't
treat yourself.
Treat yourself. I can say you will not regret it. I don't think there's any regrets there. I mean, maybe it'll hurt for a month or two as you're making payments on your credit card. I don't know about your financial situation, but I don't think you're going to regret it.
Okay. This is an interesting question. It's from Andrew. He says, "What projects have you lot?"
Oh, Kenny.
He's absolutely covered in sawdust right now.
Nice.
A black dog
covered in
sawdust right now.
That's perfect.
Andrew says, "What projects have you lot added texture to, and using what method or technique? More importantly, what techniques would you recommend for someone wanting to try their hand at it for the first time?" So I thought this was kind of interesting. We probably should do this as a co-answer, but I love texture in my projects. I will, a couple of projects I've actually textured a drawer front just using like a carving gouge. And I think the technique there, or lack thereof, was as random as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, try to facet the surface as much as possible and make little divots in kind of random things. Step back like across the room and take a look at it and go, it needs a little something over there. You know, do the little Bob Ross thing and make happy little divots all over the surface. I've also found that just in the hand tool work that I do, I actually strive for more faceted looks on things. It's got that kind of handmade look to it. So just as simple as grabbing my foreplane and scalloping an edge or scalloping a surface, a flat surface. But, you know, instead of focusing on thicknessing the board, focusing on actually smooth planing. So I'm you know, paying attention to tear out and stuff like that, stuff that I would normally ignore when I've got a foreplane out and just trying to hog off wood. And you can get really cool kind of undulating wavy textures very easily with just a regular old plane with a curved edge on it. The other thing is, I mentioned carving gouges already. Any hollowing type work, I actually kind of love the idea. I made a, oh shoot, it was just a serving tray of some sort. And I just carved like a little round divot, like a little round circle in the side of it. And it was just cool. It provided shadow where there was none before. That and the fact that I carved it, so it was a slightly faceted look inside. So it wasn't this perfectly smooth thing. It served no purpose whatsoever. I suppose maybe you could do like a sushi board and put like a tiny little bit of soy sauce in there, because it was like an eighth of an inch deep at most. But it was just kind of a cool thing. You know, sometimes that texture, that little whatever it is that breaks up the light as it reflects across the surface is enough to just kind of go, ooh, check that out. That's kind of cool looking. Yeah. You know, carving does the same thing. Moldings do the same thing. There's a fair amount of texture that comes with that. Mark, I know you've played with this a fair amount with like power carving and things like that. I mean, you've got that piece that you made at David Marks that like launched the whole love of power carving for you.
Yeah, it's, you know, with power tools, you can get kind of crazy with it because you can go fast and you find that you've now covered 90% of your project in texture and now it looks like crap. But I haven't really done...
Less is more, definitely.
Yeah, with texture, you do have to be restrained a little bit. I actually don't do much of this, but the times that I have done it, I've just basically used a little die grinder and I've got a like oval shaped ball mill on there and I just do a little tap, tap, tap action, and it takes a while, but eventually you get the whole surface. And again, like you're talking about, you want to sort of create this illusion of randomness when it's truly anything but. It's very difficult it's very difficult to be random. But the few times I've done it, 3 actually now, that I like it. I think it looks really good. It gives it this weird hand hammered almost sort of look that is, it's unmistakable and it's hard to replicate with any other method, you know? So, but again, I don't think it's good on large surfaces. You have to be really, really restrained with your use of it. And I think, I don't know, it's definitely an artistic thing. And I'm not one to throw out the art word because I always have trouble determining what truly is art and what isn't. But this is definitely something that I feel once you've designed a project and you've got the wood species, you've got everything like proportions laid out, you decide to put some texture into something, I can't see that as anything but an artistic endeavor. And I don't consider myself very artistic. So that's why sometimes I'm very hesitant to do this to something because I'm afraid of ruining it or making it look really dumb because I've just now put a bunch of little divots in it. But I mean, maybe that's the reason why a lot of people don't do it, is because it actually does take a certain level of technique and a certain level of an artistic eye, where it's almost all too easy to go too far.
Right. Yeah. And that's bitten me several times. One stroke too many. I've had a lot of, you said this earlier about kind of the smaller surfaces.
Yeah.
I've used this on drawer pulls before. And you can get, I think the smaller the part you're doing it to, the smaller the area you need to texture. Because it's like I textured the entire face of the drawer pull and it looked like crap. And then I went back and I textured like just a little spot in the center that ended up being like an 1/8 of an inch circle, and it was awesome. It totally changed the look of everything. By the way, if anybody's watching the video, this little divot in this piece of mahogany, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to see in the camera, but this is actually a carving practice board that I worked on with Chuck Binder years ago, and I've just kind of kept it around the shop. But it was a technique for carving a concave surface with a single gouge, and that's what inspired me to kind of play with it and add it into things. It's just simple stuff. Pick up a couple carving gouges and have some fun with it.
And it's something similar to that with the Krenov-inspired stand that I did in the Guild. I made an oval on the front of the drawer and then ran a piece of sycamore through it. So it was basically an oval divot with a thin piece of this sycamore going from side to side that gives you the little handle pole that you could pull on. So the divot itself served no purpose other than giving you a little more finger space to be able to grab that little handle that was there. But that was totally presented as I've got this idea. It might be terrible, but I'm going to try it anyway, you know? Right.
Oh, and I just thought of another one. I've only done this a couple of times, but it's very commonly used on a lot of period furniture, the stippling of a background. So if you have like a carved surface, or maybe you have a fretwork surface, the background behind it is just stamped. You know, they'll have like, you could even use like a nail set and just pound it through and kind of stipple the background, because what it does is it breaks up the reflection behind it, differentiates the background, and allows what's in front of it to pop. You know, whatever that fretwork is, or whatever the relief carving that is over top of it. It's kind of a cool, easy technique to do.
I'm pretty sure, sort of go back in your time machine to like 2007. Didn't Tommy Mac do that on his Bombay Secretary?
No, not on the Bombay. He built a join chest.
Okay.
Think Peter Follansbee. He built the Jacobean chest.
Okay. I knew there was something where I saw that technique for the first time. I think it was.
Yeah, it was the same low relief carving, and he stippled the background to make the carving pop a little bit more. Yeah.
Right.
Very, very common 17th century technique.
Gotcha. Yeah. By the way, I saw a Facebook Live thing where he was half naked. By half naked, I mean topless, which is it's your top half, so it's half naked. And he's on Facebook Live topless, and his wife is measuring things. What it actually turned out to be. Come on, get your minds out of the gutter, people. I guess he's having back surgery, so they had to do like very specific measurements for this type of surgery. I don't know anything about it, but I was busy with something, so I was quickly watching and then had to go do something else. But hey, wish you luck, Tommy. It sounds like a very scary kind of surgery situation, but hopefully everything's okay.
Kidding. Oh, not to beat this one not to beat this dead horse, but Jim in the chat room just said you can use a Spokeshave to sculpt an edge, and he's absolutely right. I've had a lot of success with that. Just kind of not necessarily rounding the edge over, but kind of sculpting it and giving it a little bit of irregularity. That's a lot of fun.
Well, I think in general, hand tool users like to call this like something they're doing intentionally because their surfaces are always irregular and crappy. So they have to be like, oh, well, that's what we call texture.
Yeah. It's an authentic look.
Authentic texture. Okay, so we have another question here that we're both, we've kind of been doing a good job of both of us answering questions so far, so let's do more of that. Billy Newton wrote in. He says, the other day, my mom visited us. She's pretty handy and wanted to learn how to use some tools in my shop. We used some scraps to make pencil holders. She used the bandsaw, the jointer, the planer, the table saw with a sled, and the router table. I cut the miters because I was not comfortable with her doing that. Afterwards, I wondered if I let her do too much on the machines that are foreign to her. Have you ever had to teach a friend or a family member in the shop? And if so, were there certain limitations you placed on them regarding tools or processes? This is interesting. I think this goes along the same lines if we were answering the question about do you let kids in your shop?
Right. Although in this case, like if we're talking adults, You can't really throw the kid card as in, they should know what they're doing type thing.
Yeah.
Which actually could be worse because like they could be a total blowhard. And, I know what I'm doing. Zip, there goes a finger.
I can't tell you, dude, how many times I've been in a class, and no offense if you happen to be an older gentleman that took a class with me. I'm not saying
if you happen to be a blowhard.
I'm not saying which one of you, but I've seen many, many times in class situations and classes that I've taken, like other people that are taking the class, where there's this dude who's got a router and thinks it's his job to take that router and shove it as hard as he can into the work. And I'm just like, there's no subtlety or finesse with their motion with the router. And then the router just wants to go flying and the work wants to go flying. There are just people who don't naturally have that hesitation. Maybe that's the wrong word for it, but it's a degree of finesse that you need to bring, especially to a power tool, so that the tool doesn't just take over and you lose control over it. So I've seen people who are falsely confident. They have this confidence that they have no business having with that tool, and it makes it even more dangerous. So sometimes a person being a little bit tentative, while too much is bad, a little bit can be helpful.
Yeah. I think in this case, and I had this situation with my brother. We were making a gift for my mom and thought, you know what, you're here, let's build something like in my shop for mom. She'll love that. She didn't care what it is. The fact that we built it together is what she cared about.
Right.
And he's a very handy guy, but he was very quick to say, I'm out of my element. Like he is like on the job. I mean, he's a civil engineer, so he's just pouring concrete more than anything else, but he's on the job with contractors and, pneumatic nailers and stuff like that. And he walked into the shop and he's like, oh geez. And he was intimidated. And I relied upon him to tell me, what do I do here? Let me back off. In a situation where because he had enough knowledge to know how dangerous things could be, I suppose. Yeah. And this was back in my power tool days. We were using table saws and band saws and all kinds of stuff. So I think there is a certain aspect, if the person in question is comfortable doing what they're doing, then just kind of staying close can be all that's needed. I think there's an aspect of letting them do it, empower them to do it, but kind of just keep your hand real close by, to hit a power switch or guide them or something like that, or if necessary, walk them through whatever this process is. Do that kind of rehearsal. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Are you comfortable with that? Oh yeah, totally good with it. Are you sure? All right, let's do it. Or if it's a repeated thing, you do it first, let them watch you, and then do it. And I think I'd feel pretty comfortable.
I think in every case, with every one of these tools, it would be pretty much what you described there. It's a 3-step process. You're going to sit there, you're going to talk about it, you're going to do it, you're going to demo it first so they see what has to happen, and you're going to explain what pressures and forces are at play and what they need to do. Then you can, depending on the tool, you could usually let them do a dry run without the tool running so they get comfortable. And then, like you said, are you comfortable? Do you want to do this? If they are, let them give it a shot. And I think at least with the students that I've had, especially in one-on-one classes, I know within about 5 seconds how much I could trust that person and how much distance I can let there be between me and them and an emergency shut off switch, and you can tell people have all kinds of body language that let you know whether or not they have confidence at this tool. And if they don't yet, then I know I need to be a little bit more hands-on. So it is something where you're going to have to watch the person and judge. And this is why I brought the analogy to the kids being in the shop. It's the same thing. There is no one right answer. It depends on the kid and their aptitude and how well they handle these things. So same thing with an adult. And I think, like you said, you do need to be a little more careful because adults can come at this with a false sense of security that they shouldn't have, that can actually throw off your judgment of the situation. But I wouldn't say that I think the table saw might be the last tool that I would let anyone, doesn't matter who they are or how old they are. The table saw would probably be the last tool that I would have them use unless we're doing like a sled operation with clamps holding the workpiece. Outside of that, I would, not that I wouldn't let them use it, but I would wait till they have a bunch of other power tools under their belt before I let them hop on a table saw.
Right. You ever let Nicole use your table saw?
Heck no. Actually, she doesn't use much of the tooling. I mean, she likes the lathe, and when she turned some bowls and she did the spoon recently, I had her cutting the blank at the bandsaw. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I mean, here's a girl who has seen more woodworking educational footage than she has ever wanted to see. So she's definitely been around it, but has never necessarily had her hands on the material making the cuts. And I was really pleasantly surprised. She did not need much guidance in terms of where her hands are, where to apply pressure, how to turn the workpiece, what to expect of the blade as she's trying to make turns and things like that. So she did really, really well.
Nice.
But yeah,
soon enough, she's going to be trolling your YouTube channel.
I can only hope. I mean,
lots of you should.
You know, you could have done it this way. Actually, I should say Shannon Rogers does it this way, and
oh, Lord.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So far, I don't think that's ever happened. So.
Not yet. Well, actually, any hand tool video, usually that stuff comes up. God forbid I venture into the hand tool territory, and you get all the Shannon Rogers and Paul Sellers zealots coming out after you, and Cosman too. Let's throw him in there too. Okay, so I got one more question here. How are we doing on time? We doing okay? Don't do that. Please. We actually have a fun question. It's got nothing to do with woodworking, but I thought it was fun. So why the heck not? Oh, crap. I forgot the guy's name. Okay, well, I'm just going to read it. You know who you are.
I forgot to hit record. Don't do that.
No, no, not this time. Okay, so just for fun, not exactly wood related, but not necessarily a deal breaker for you guys. So what's he trying to say? What is he trying to say? Okay, recently read an article on Yahoo that used quote-unquote data to determine the most hated food in each state. So we'll put a link there if you want to check out your state. And Shannon, bring yours up because I didn't see what Maryland has. He says, now, being that I've arbitrarily designated each of you as the sole representative of your respective states, I inquire, what say you? Mark is off the hook because Colorado's product or food that they hate is Flaming Hot Cheetos. So he says, you're off the hook because Flaming Hot Cheetos are superfluous at best, or I assign you to New Jersey, and the logic demonstrated there is impeccable. However, Matt's state is hating on beans, which is not only extremely vague, but also ignoring an excellent source of fiber. And Shannon, I don't even know what to say about yours. Apparently, the remaining occupants of the food world are absolute perfection there. So let's see. I don't think the next part is necessary to read. So let's look at this. Okay. Flaming Hot Cheetos. I can tell you I've never eaten them, but here's the weird thing about this. Shannon would be much more prepared to address the hatred of Flaming Hot Cheetos being a Colorado thing than I am, because he spent a heck of a lot more time in Colorado than I have.
I don't know. It's probably because regular Cheetos are more orange, more Broncos colored than Flaming Hot Cheetos.
They're a little more red.
Yeah, and
kind of like the Chiefs.
For that, and then for the college fans, we pretty much still hate Nebraska. So any Big Red, we're not into it.
Fair enough.
I think, knowing what I know of Denver, it's a very sports-oriented town. That's probably why.
It's a good point. I like that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What's Maryland?
The corner piece of a brownie.
What? What data? I mean, obviously, let's just put this out there. This is clearly BS. This whole thing is stupid. But what data could they possibly use to determine that?
I guess a lot of corner brownies left over.
Who's measuring corner brownies?
I don't know. I kind of like the corner of a brownie. I guess that just further
it's got more crust.
Shows that I'm not a Marylander.
Yeah, it's so weird. So gas station wine is the thing that's hated in New Jersey?
I saw that. Isn't that kind of universally hated everywhere? I mean,
I guess. I mean, I guess it depends on which gas station you shop at. Or, you know what? Wine is terrible. So for all you folks who drink it, I mean, it's good. I'm glad you enjoy your sour grape juice. But I can't stand wine. Wine is just terrible.
Some of this makes sense. Like Washington doesn't like Keurig K-cups, up in Starbucks land. Okay, I can see that. But
yeah, because there's like a coffee place on literally every block.
Hawaii doesn't like Coke. Okay.
What do you like, RC Cola, or what's their preference there? Voss water.
The funny thing is I was looking at this map and there's this tiny little dot like in Maryland, and I was like, what state is that? It's like, oh yeah, DC.
Right.
They don't like turkey bacon in DC apparently.
Weird.
Bunch of turkeys down there.
It is. All right. Well, this is totally stupid. So if you want to go check this out, it's it's interesting to see what this stupid thing says about your state. Let us know what you think. All right. I think that just about does it for our show today. Shannon, how about you give them that contact info and we'll get out of here.
I can do that. If you have stuff you want to tell us, a bunch of ways to do it. Create a voicemail by using your voice memo app on your phone and send it to woodtalkonline@gmail.com, or just write us at woodtalkshow.com/contact. or just go to the webpage and write it there. And send us likes and fun stuff on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We're all there at Wood Talk Show.
Nice. Sounds good.
Show.
woodtalkshow.com. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
All right.
Flaming Hot Cheetos.
I like those.
Flaming Hot Cheetos.
I would like this if they were simply using, like if you found out they were using sales data. Right. And comparing to other states, this one doesn't sell as much, so this is the product that is the most hated compared to the national average. But when you have things like the corner of a brownie, there is no measurable metric or data that would determine that.
Virginia, dabbing pizza grease with a napkin. That's not a food.
Yeah.
That's an action. What?
Oh, okay. Data is provided by Hater. It's a dating app that matches people based on what they hate. So what this is actually people who are desperate to find love and are millennials.
Yeah.
That's what this is measuring at this point, because they're using a dating app called Hater and talking about what they've eaten. Okay, I just generalized a lot, but...
And this is why North Korea hates us.
Yeah, exactly.
This right here.
This is why they hate freedom. Oh, man, that's nuts. Okay, so I'm going to kill the live feed just in case we need to talk some business.
Bye, live people. Thanks
See
for
ya.
hanging out.
Thanks, everybody.